Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Signix Dynamics welcomes you all to this webinar on mastering Alfresco Web Scripts for a hassle-free Alfresco ECM integration. So the presenters for today's webinar will be my colleague Ramesh Chauhan. He is the author of the book Learning Alfresco Web Scripts, and he works as an ECM consultant with Signix Dynamics. And myself, Ranjit Shankar, I work as Client Solutions Manager at Signix Dynamics. So, the agenda for today's webinar will be something as follows. We will begin by talking about the latest trends, challenges surrounding enterprise content management, followed by a detailed walkthrough of Alfresco Web Scripts, basically the what, why, when, how, along with illustrations and examples. We will also delve into web script integrations with some implementation examples. And finally, we will end with an introduction of Signix Dynamics. So let us try to understand what are some of the key dynamics impacting ECM today. So one of the things that we see today is the explosive growth of content within the enterprise. Cloud-based file synchronization and share servers are largely driving hybrid ECM solutions. On the other hand, we are also seeing ECM systems increasingly becoming the platform for creating content applications. We are also seeing increased integration of ECM with business applications. Mobility is another key trend where we see a lot of demand from users to access documents and participate in workflows using their mobile devices. The sheer amount of enterprise information that needs to be governed continues to grow, underlining the need for an information governance strategy. So as content continues to outpace infrastructure, one of the key challenges is that file servers continue to be overwhelmed with content. Information security is also one of the key concerns as we increasingly find information leaks happening out of the organization. So what are some of the priorities given this challenges? So one of the priorities would be to manage informational risks arising from the inability to institute informational governance, to drive greater user engagement across a variety of channels, and also to focus on content analytics. So what should ECM ideally support? So enterprise content management systems help us create a central repository for our documents, which can be of various types, departments at a centralized location. It also helps to incorporate workflows, approval mechanisms, business rules of each organization into its applications. ECM should also support faster faceted enterprise search. ECM should be scalable from a future growth perspective. It should provide ease of access over multiple channels like mobile, and content needs to be centralized. Digitization is another key trend where we see increasingly people in enterprises going paperless. So these are some of the key trends. And of course, last but not the least, support, because when we talk about open source enterprise content management, invariably support is also key to sustaining ECM applications. Let's talk very briefly about the enterprise content management lifecycle and what are things that it entails. It begins by a capture of data, information, documents. So creating the repository, gathering the documents to be uploaded by the user. It should also incorporate workflows to filter unwanted information. And once that is done, obviously the preservation is also a key aspect of the life cycle, wherein we are able to store, archive, and retrieve important records whenever we want. And it also should allow any application to access this content whenever it needs. And finally, the delivery of this should happen across a variety of channels. So, and now, to talk more about Alfresco Web Scripts, I would like to hand over to my colleague Ramesh Chauhan, who is the author of the book Alfresco, Learning Alfresco Web Scripts, and he'll be able to talk more about Alfresco Web Scripts. Over to you, Ramesh.
Thank you, Ranjit. Hello everyone, this is Ramesh Chauhan. Good morning, good evening to all of you.
So incidentally, Ramesh's book is also available on a variety of e-commerce websites. So go ahead, Ramesh.
Yes. So consider a scenario wherein you want to implement a business solution which will have a custom front end that is having Alfresco as a backend repository. Basically, you want to build up an implementation for your business need that will have a custom front end interacting with the Alfresco repository in a secure way in order to allow end users to access the content on demand and provide the various features of Alfresco repository. Now, you might have a lot of questions on top of your mind, such as how is it possible to access Alfresco repository from the custom front end? What are the possible alternatives that you can use for that? Is it going to be a complex implementation building up this kind of APIs? What about accessing the content based upon the user authentication? How about maintaining client state and so on? So okay, the answer to all of these questions is Alfresco Web Scripts. Using Web Scripts, you can build up a customized integration solution on top of the Alfresco repository for your business requirements. WebScript is the key feature of Alfresco Enterprise Content Management System, which you'll be using in almost all of your Alfresco implementation. Now, let's understand what is WebScript. In simple words, WebScripts are the powerful and extremely useful services provided by Alfresco to access the repository in a secure way. They can be reusable across different platforms and provide uniform access to the content to a wide range of client applications. If we take a look at the technical definition of the web script, then they are RESTful web services. They are bound to a specific URI and they respond to the HTTP methods such as GET, POST, PUT, and DELETE. From a developer's point of view, web scripts are easy to learn, easy to understand, easy to develop, easy to debug, maintain, and deploy. Developer generally prefers web scripts as a first choice when it comes to accessing Alfresco repository from external applications. In a business user's opinion, web scripts basically bridge the gap between business requirement and technical implementation for your customized integration solution. And hence, web scripts are the backbone of your integration solution that has been developed on top of your Alfresco as a backend repository. Now, having understood what web scripts are, let's understand what are the other alternatives and why web script is the preferred choice amongst all of them. So the other two alternatives are SOAP-based web services and CMIS. Web services is one alternative, but they are heavier client-side requirements they are having. They only support XML. They're having dependency on SOAP, and also scalability is a challenge if we take web service as an option. The another option is CMIS, which is basically a generic implementation, and it provides a common set of services to communicate with any CMS compliant repository. Hence, it could be possible that there could be some functionality you cannot get with CMIS, and for that, you may need to implement and go for the custom web scripts development in that scenario. And if we take a look at the Alfresco web scripts, then the main advantages are there are no complex specifications required. There is no dependency on SOAP. It can support multiple formats. You can have your response in multiple formats, and the web scripts are easily scalable as well. And due to all these reasons, web scripts are generally the preferred choice amongst the developers. Now, when can we use the web scripts? In any of your development project wherein you are building up a customized integration solution against Alfresco repository, you can use the web scripts. For that, you can leverage upon the out-of-the-box web scripts. Those are provided in Alfresco, and also based upon your requirement, you can build your own custom web scripts as well. In support or maintenance projects as well, web scripts could be heavily used in order to maintain your business solution on a live production system. On a live system, you may sometimes come across requirements such as you need to delete some unneeded content. You want to fix some kind of data issue. You need to fetch some specific data based upon your business user's request. Then, in such cases, web scripts could be a great help. The amazing feature of web scripts, having JavaScript-based controller to interact with the Alfresco repository without restarting the server, can help you fix some critical issues on your production server without restarting them. Hence, web scripts are very useful. Now, there are a number of different environments where web scripts can be accessed and used, such as HTTP client, for example, your web browser, HTTP client APIs. Using them, you can use the web scripts from your program. Then in portals, JSF pages, Alfresco platform. These are to name a few. Now let's understand how web scripts work. So web scripts basically uses the model, view, and controller pattern. Controller is mainly responsible for performing the required business logic as per your business requirement, and then it will populate the model object. Model is basically a data structure object which is used to pass the data between controller and view. View in case of web scripts would be a free marker template that will be used to render your response. So now, what are the different kinds of web scripts? So those are data web script, and another one is presentation web script. For building integration solutions, the data web scripts, which is alternatively named as repository web scripts, those are used for building integration solutions. So data web scripts are basically an interface to the repository for your clients in order to create, update, retrieve, or delete content in the repository. This kind of web scripts generally send XML or JSON as a response, and based upon your requirement, you can choose any of them. And your client application will have to pass the response in order to use it further and render it on your front end. On the other hand, presentation web scripts are mainly used to build the user interfaces, and this kind of web scripts will generally be rendering the HTML response, as they will be building up the user interfaces components such as dashlet, portlets, and so on. Now, after having gone through what web scripts are, how they actually work, when we can use them, and why only web scripts, what are the different kinds of web scripts, let's take a look at how web scripts can be implemented. Whenever we start something new to learn, we generally take an example of Hello World program. So we are also going to do the same thing over here. We also take an example of our Hello World web scripts, and let's now understand how we can implement that. So here, first we'll have to develop our web script. So the first code snippet that you can see over here is hello world.get.description.xml, which is basically our web script description document. Here we have specified the short name for the web script, that is hello world. Then we have specified the description for our web script, saying that it is the first web script, hello world. And then we have specified the URL, wherein we have given the URL and the arguments that our web script is expecting. And we also have given the authentication detail, which indicates that in order to access this particular web script, at the minimum we need to have a user authentication. Now the second code snippet over here is hello world.get.js, which is basically the web script controller implementation, wherein we have populated one model object which is holding an email address value. Now third code snippet, which is hello world.get.html.ftl, which is basically used to render the response of our web script. We have used HTML as a response template, so we are expecting that our web script will be returning the response in an HTML format. So once we have developed these three files, we need to deploy them. So as we are developing a simple web script, we'll deploy it directly into the Alfresco repository. So in the repository, you can place these files under data dictionary, WebScripts extensions folder. So once you have placed these files over there, the next thing to do is we need to register the web script. So we can hit this particular URL, that is HTTP, your host name, then the port on which your Alfresco has been deployed, then Alfresco service index. Once you hit this particular URL and click on refresh web scripts, it will be registering our web script. Now, once we are done with the development, deployment of the web script, we have registered the web script, then the next thing is access the web script. So in order to access the web script, we'll need to hit this particular URL, which is HTTP, your host name, your IP address, Alfresco service, and the later part that you can see over here, hello world question mark name is equals to ABC. That is something that comes from the URL element that we had provided in our description document. So once we hit this URL, it will be rendering our response, the HTML response, displaying that hello ABC, email address is info@signex.com. So this is how we can build up our simple web script, hello world web script. Now, let's take a look at what are the building blocks those are required to build up any kind of web script. So there are some components those are mandatory, some components those are not mandatory or optional. First we'll go through the mandatory one. So each and every web script needs to have the description document. It is a must for any kind of a web script. Description document will be holding the details about your web script, such as short name, description, as we have seen in our previous slide. Then the main important one, the URL for your web script using which you will be invoking your web script. Then any authentication related details, any transaction related detail, any default response template you need to provide for your web script, and so on. So such kind of details are provided into the description document. Now the next one is response template. Response templates are mandatory in some scenario and are optional in some scenarios. We'll just take a look at that, but before that we'll take a look at controller implementation, the optional one. For a web script, it could have no controller. It could have a JavaScript backed controller. It could have a Java backed controller, or it could have JavaScript and Java backed both type of controller. So when you are having no controller implementation for your web script, in that case, response template is mandatory. When you are using a JavaScript backed web controller, so in that case also, response template is mandatory. For Java backed controller, there are two flavors of implementation you can have for a Java backed controller. One is declarative web script and another one is abstract web script. We will not go into the details of them, but when you are using declarative web script and your controller is extending declarative web script class, in that case, response template for your web script is mandatory. But when your Java backed controller class is extending abstract web script class, then in that case, response template is not mandatory, and your controller class can take care of rendering the response in the way you want. Now, the another optional one is for internationalization, you can use the resource bundle. So for example, you need to return some response in local specific languages. In that case, you can have the local specific properties file for your web script, and you can render the response based on the locale. The next one is configuration document. Configuration document, whenever you will be implementing the web script, you will mainly be using description document, response templates, and controller implementation. You'll not be majorly using this resource bundle or configuration document, but those could be of great help when you are developing web script. For example, in a requirement wherein you want to transform the image in your web script, so that you can have a configuration parameter defined under a configuration document wherein you'll be specifying the width and height And these are configuration parameters. So without restarting the server, you can control this kind of parameter. So in such requirements, a configuration document would be very useful. Now, let's take a look at the invoke methods, how you can invoke the web scripts. So whenever you are developing web script, after development, you need to test your web script. So in that case, you'll be using the web browser in order to test your web script. You can just hit the URL of your web script from your web browser and you can see the response of your web script. For example, the way we did the complete URL that we build up for our Hello World web script, we can just simply use that URL for our Hello World web script and we can put it in our web browser and can access it. So that is for GET request. But in a scenario when you want to test kind of a put or delete request, so in that case you'll not be able to do it with your browser. In such cases you'll be using REST client web browser plugins. For example, Firefox or Google Chrome are providing such kind of plugins using which you can invoke your post, put or delete kind of web scripts. Now, there may be some scenarios wherein you want to execute your web script from a standalone Java program. So in that case, you can use the HTTP client APIs, and using them, you can invoke the web script from your standalone Java programs. If you are having a Spring-based application and from your Spring-based services, you want to invoke the web script, you want to consume the web script, then you can leverage upon the REST template, and using that, you can access the web script. From the Alfresco share components, for example, you are building some kind of a dashlet, you already have a presentation to your web script in place, and you want to fetch some data from your repository. So from your client-side JavaScript as well, you can invoke the repository to your web script. Now, there could be some scenario wherein it would not be possible for you to execute a web script from web browser or any of the client or from Java program, and you need to execute the web script from a command line. So in that case, you can use CURL, and using which you can invoke the web script from command line. And also you can invoke the web script from JSF pages as well. Now, let's take a look at some of the best practices. So based upon my experience on working on the various projects and developing multiple web scripts for different projects, I'd like to share a few of the best practices with you. So wherein the first thing is that whenever you are creating a web script, you first need to identify which kind of HTTP method that you'll be using, and you need to use the appropriate HTTP method for your web script. For example, if you are retrieving the content, for example, from the repository, in that case you would like to go for HTTP GET method. If you want to update some content in the repository, in that case you may want to go for put method. If you want to create content in the repository, post would be the obvious choice. And if you want to delete the content from the repository, then you can use the delete method. Although it is not a mandate to use the appropriate method, for example, you can use the post method and you can do the get thing, but that is not a recommended thing. Instead, you should use the appropriate method based upon the type of web script you are developing. Then the second most important thing that you should take care of is the naming conventions for your web script. You must follow the naming convention for your web script. If you don't follow the naming convention, then there may be the chances that you might end up spending your time debugging why your web script is not working and why your web script has not been registered. So if you have followed the naming convention in the first place, you can directly start to working on testing your web script. Then the third thing would be in a description document. You should always keep your description document up to date. So in a larger code base, when you're working on a larger project wherein you are having multiple web scripts and multiple developers are working on the same project. So by just looking at the description document, the developers should come to know that, okay, what this particular web script is doing. For example, if the web script is expecting some arguments, then all the arguments, as a best practice, you should add them in your description document. Hence, the recommendation would be keep your description document up to date for the maintenance point of view of your code base. And whenever you are creating any of the web script, you decided that you want to create if any of the out-of-the-box web script is there which you can leverage for your requirement, and if it is not there, then you can go and create your own custom web script. Also, the another thing is that what kind of controller you need to choose. So there are the number of parameters which are there for selecting the controller, but the first thing would be check if the JavaScript APIs which are provided by Alfresco, if they are meeting up with your requirement or not. If they are meeting, then in that case you may want to go with JavaScript controller. And for selecting the response templates, so identify what kind of response templates your web script should return, and check that if those kind of response templates are supported by the Alfresco Web Script framework or not. So in that case also, it will help you to choose which kind of controller you want to go for. It will help you choose either you want to go for Java-based declarative controller implementation or Java-based abstract web script controller implementation, wherein you want to render the response in your own way. And another thing would be from the code deployment perspective. So for deploying the code in our Hello World web script, we have directly deployed the code into the repository, as it was a simple web script and it was just the one web script. But in your larger code base, the suggested way would be deploying them into the repository. So this will help you to manage your code as well, and whenever you are doing any upgradation to the another version, in that case it will be helpful for you to manage your code. So these are some of the best practices. Now, the integration, as we have seen in any of your custom implementation, whereas you're having a custom front end which is having Alfresco as a backend repository, you can use Alfresco Web Script for integration mechanism. So if you're having a live portal or a web content management system in Drupal or an e-commerce site developed in Magento or a learning management system in Moodle, for all of this you can use web scripts and can use Alfresco repository web script and can display or render the content based upon your requirement. As Ranjit mentioned, we also have authored a book on learning Alfresco web scripts, which provides a comprehensive information about the Alfresco web script development and the framework. And this book is helpful for the beginners in order to understand all the essential needs for learning the Alfresco web scripts, and at the same time it would be useful for the experienced developers as well. Now, let's take a look at some of the implementation examples wherein the client has benefited from using Alfresco web scripts in their Alfresco ECM integration solutions. So one of the example is that managing ROI with real-time visibility. This was for one of the media Conglomerate, which is a leading entertainment company. And the main business need was the movie promotion approval system in order to create, track, monitor, and optimize the promotions with distributors and the different channel partners across the world. And the key features that they were looking was the collaborative workflow for review and approval, then the reporting dashboard for marketing, budget, and spending. So the complete implementation was they were having Graves web application framework as a front end, and they were having Alfresco as a backend repository. So here, the complete integration was developed using WebScript. And using this implementation, the benefits client has achieved were kind of increased visibility with reports and real-time updates on promotion status and the overall spending. The another one was increasing business velocity. This was for event and marketing services company. The main business need was a content management system and a publishing platform to manage the events and the publication site. So here Drupal was used as a front-end system, and Alfresco was used as the back-end repository. The Drupal and Alfresco communication, there was an authoring environment in Alfresco, so the content authors were using the Alfresco share as the authoring environment. It was a complete custom UI implementation that has been developed into Alfresco share in order to provide the complete authoring experience to the users using Alfresco share. So Alfresco share, this UI implementation, we have created a different presentation tier web script and also a repository web script. So Alfresco share presentation tier was talking to Alfresco repository using the data web script and was rendering the content on the Alfresco share UI screen. And once the content is published and it is ready for the publication, the sync between Drupal and Alfresco was done with CMIS. In this particular case, the CMIS was the suitable one for pushing the data from Alfresco repository to Drupal. So there we use CMIS. But for this Alfresco share complete UI thing, we had to go for web script. The benefits that the client got from this particular implementation was that the complete iteration for content creation, its approval to the publishing channel, it got speed up, and it increased the business visibility and operational efficiency. So this was basically about the different implementations using WebScript, and I would like to hand it over to Ranjit now. Thank you, everyone. It was great speaking to all of you. Ranjit, over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ramesh. That was indeed a very informative session from you, indeed. And now, we would just like to once again reiterate the fact that you can get all the information you want and more about Alfresco Web Scripts from the book Learning Alfresco Web Scripts, and it is available on a variety of e-commerce websites. So without further ado, I would just like to provide a brief introduction of Signex Datamatics, the company. So we are a pure play open source consulting company based in Silicon Valley for the last 14 years with over 500 plus open source implementations. We've helped clients address business goals, increase business velocity, lower the cost of doing business, and help them gain competitive advantage. So as part of our thought leadership and community contribution initiatives, we have authored more than 14 open source books and made over 5,000 community contributions. So in terms of our offices, we are spread globally with over 13 offices and counting. So in terms of our enterprise content management services and solutions, we partner companies such as Alfresco for document management, Drupal for web content management, Moodle for learning knowledge management, of course, Apache Solr for enterprise search. As far as products go, we have a couple of them here. We have Open Contract Manager, which basically helps to automate the entire contract lifecycle and reduce the contract turnaround time. Rapido is another framework for content management and publishing, which involves Alfresco ECM and Drupal integration. So there you go, the application of web scripts. As far as services are concerned, we also have something called OPERA, which stands for Open Source Readiness Assessment. So we help enterprises assess the health of their IT portfolio and provide recommendations, develop solution blueprint, and help them also adopt an open source roadmap. So this enables better alignment of IT with business objectives at dramatically lower total cost of ownership. So with this, we now have a very brief overview of our enterprise content management practice. We are primarily partners with Alfresco for enterprise content management, Acquia, which is the owning company of Drupal for web content management, and Episoft as well. So we have, so far till date, we have more than 115 plus ECM implementations. We have a dedicated team of 50 plus content experts. We've authored more than 6 Alfresco books, including the one that Ramesh has written. And we have also been duly recognized by our partners over the years. And we also have significantly contributed to the open source community. So once again, so I would just like to thank you all for taking the time today to attend this webinar. Remember to download a sample chapter of the Alfresco Web Script book. This is very much available online, and at this point in time, we can actually take a couple of questions from the audience. So if you want to direct any of your questions to Ramesh, he's there, and we have time enough maybe for a couple of questions. So over to you, the audience. Feel free to shoot at this point in time. So I guess we have people from the audience asking us about where to find the download link for the sample chapter. So I would like to reiterate that we'll be sharing a copy of this webinar presentation as well as the recording with all the attendees. So you will be able to browse through these slides, and you will be able to find the link at the end of the presentation. So that will also be addressed as well. If we do not have any questions at this point, I would just like to once again thank you all for having taken the time to attend this webinar. I hope you found this information we provided extremely useful. And from myself and from Ramesh and the whole team at Cygnus Datamatics, we would like to wish you a good day, and everyone take care of yourself, and goodbye. Thank you.